My name is Cara, Lucia. I currently serve as president for NIRSA Leaders in Collegiate Recreation. I am so excited to have some friends and colleagues with me today to continue our conversation about critical hope. It's hard to believe that my presidency will be wrapping up by April 30th, and it's great that we're able to come together for this conversation. Recently, we've had an opportunity to converse about hope with action, generations exhibiting critical hope, sharing ripples of hope, and sustaining hope. And with this conversation today, I'm excited to have with us Leigh, Jocelyn, Paul, Steve, and Zack. And before we get started, I'm going to have them briefly introduce themselves, say their position and university, and something that brings them joy. So Leigh, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Cara. My name is Leigh Johnson, and I am the Fitness and Wellness Coordinator at Georgia Southern University. And something that brings me joy is working with students and watching them develop. Thanks,
Leigh. Jocelyn?
So Jocelyn Hill, Director of Recreational Sports and Fitness at American University. What brings me joy, and trust me, I love my students, but I like playing golf more.
Yeah. Golf with students then, maybe. Or maybe not, yeah.
Yeah, it depends.
Paul?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Joseph. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am one of the coordinators of sports programs here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And what brings me joy, watching sports, food, hang out with good people, and since I'm a homebody by nature, my alone time.
Nice. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Bobbitt. I am the Director of Campus Recreation at UMass Amherst in the beautiful Berkshires of Massachusetts. What brings me joy is the outdoors. I'm a retired adventure program professional, and I still love to get outside, and that's what I do for fun. Just like Jocelyn plays golf, except I don't hit the ball.
Yeah. Hey, Zack, what about you?
Hey y'all, I'm Zack Sephton. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a coordinator for facilities and operations at Queen's University. And what brings me joy is creative recreation, stuff that steps outside of the realm of fitness programming and recreational sports.
Great, thanks, Zack. Well, thank you all so much for being here with us today. We're going to have a series of questions around hope together around the concept of unshakable hope. Really, and how we go about adjourning from various service roles and leadership roles to empower others to continue the work. Before we begin, I would like to read a quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He stated, "I believe with a steadfast faith that there can never be a situation that is utterly, totally hopeless. Hope is deeper and very, very close to unshakable. It's the pit of your it's the pit of your tummy. It's not in your head." And he would point to his stomach and say, "It's right here." And so it's that feeling that we feel when there's something that needs to be done. So our conversation, I've started each of these critical hope vlog sessions around a question related to critical hope. So to warm us up, I'd like to just define that for us. Critical hope is being willing to explore sensitive subjects and raise daring questions. So how have you spent time exploring subjects or raising daring questions over the past year during the pandemic, exposure to racial injustice, and the Great Resignation, or now we're calling it the Great Reshuffling, possibly? Leigh, you want to kick us off with that one?
I sure can. For many people, COVID has been really difficult. The pandemic has been very difficult, but it was also a very wonderful time for me in terms of growing and reflection. There were so many things that happened throughout these last 2 years, and especially this last year, that are going on in the world and in campus recreation and things around us. And a lot of the time, what I've needed to do is speak to my partner, my husband, and just he's helped me gain some clarity. I'm able to voice thoughts that I have that I don't necessarily know how to structure quite yet, but he's helped me gain some perspective and brought his own perspective into those as well. I've also been a part of an amazing women's group with a former colleague who now owns her own business. She runs a group called AB Barbells, and it is a group of women that are in a learning community about self-care, self-love, physical strength, emotional strength, mental strength, and having that community around me has been absolutely incredible. While I initially had gone to them for some help with personal training and just my own training, so I didn't have to think about it, the growth I've gained mentally, in addition to physically, has far surpassed what I ever thought that it would. And I've also, in this time, been working with my sorority, Alpha Chi Omega. I am a diversity, equity, inclusion facilitator for a program called Kaleidoscope. What that does, I go around to different collegiate chapters around the country, and I lead a 4-hour diversity, equity, inclusion workshop and help bring up questions they might have and responses that they wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with talking about on their own, posing a lot of questions that could raise their awareness of what's going on around them in their campus. And then honestly, with this great shuffle, I've really been speaking to a lot of my colleagues, and I think now more than ever, I've reached out to so many of my colleagues about what is happening, because if we don't talk about it, it's not going to go away. And trying to think of what might we be able to do right now and currently, what could we do to adapt and adjust to that, and what needs to change in order to shift the trajectory of the direction that we could potentially be heading in.
Thanks, Leigh. Paul, I know you had some thoughts too.
I did, thank you. What I've come across these past 2 years, going through what we've all been through, when it comes to just racial injustice, just dealing with the hard truth, and the hard thing to hear is that it still exists, both within higher ed and just in the world and in our society. And it's something that we have to recognize and address, because it will not go away unless it is addressed. And the way we address it is by making those meaningful connections with people, with different types of people from different backgrounds, understanding where people are coming from, and incorporating like social justice trainings, both within our departments, both within our families, within our communities, so on and so forth. I know here that's part of our values when it comes to rec well over a year. So we incorporate social justice training both within our student staff and with hiring and retention, but also amongst ourselves as a professional staff. We go through that as well. As for the great resignation and great reshuffling, it just comes down to the fact that it's more complicated than people just don't want to work. We all have to understand that there's such thing as COVID is still a thing, and it still exists, and people are uncomfortable going back to work. There are people that were here once before who are no longer here. The workforce has shrunken. A lot of people have either taken retirement or early retirement. People have learned to hustle without a job or things like that. Their childcare costs are still high and still an issue. So these are a lot of things that need to be considered, and things as we move forward when it comes to just hiring process and retention processes. We just got to rethink things. I know that's something that we're having a conversation here about. And also just put out the flip side, just knowing that having that critical hope, that knowing that things will get better, that in time, it may take a couple of years, but in time, things will get better when it comes to just people figuring out where they want to be and knowing what they want. That reshuffling was a great time to really think about what people want in a career or in life. So those are my thoughts.
You really hit that one on point, because this exhibiting critical hope takes a lot of hard work, right? It's not something that is easy. And I think that's the part, right, where we can maybe get tied into the frustration of, maybe I need to step back, let others do some of the work, or how am I sustaining that hope in myself and others? And so we're going to be talking a lot today about empowering others and how we've been empowered throughout our career. So Zack, if you can talk with us a little bit about a time when you were empowered by someone on your campus to continue the work.
Yeah, for sure. And I will actually shout out by name our intramural coordinator, Judith Olusewa. She has been huge this past year in empowering me to continue the work and to continue trying to make positive change on our campus and in our programs. And just having someone like her here who is equally motivated to see that positive change and to put the work in to get that positive change has been so empowering and made such a positive impact on myself in keeping that hope and doing that work. And just being able to keep pushing when things aren't going your way and when it feels like maybe things aren't going to get better because you need to keep pushing forward to try and get these things done. Having someone in your corner like that, having her in my corner to be that person inspiring me and encouraging me has been huge.
I love how you actually called her name out. That's great. Giving that credit and sharing that. And so let's spend a little time really focusing on times that we've been empowered. Paul, I'm going to have you start this one off for us. But how have you been empowered over the past year, and maybe how this might have led to an opportunity for you and to create some positive change?
Well, for sure. I have to give credit to my former supervisor, Ashley Lax, who really empowered me in the time that we worked together, of like being able to not be afraid to make mistakes, not being afraid to put myself out there, and just overcoming like imposter syndrome. Like that's a real thing. So overcoming that and being able to take on some new responsibilities that has come across my way, or take on some new challenges or projects, like it's amazing once you put yourself out there what you can accomplish. So that's why I got to give credit to her.
Great. Jocelyn?
So I'm going to come at it from a bit of a different viewpoint. I have a circle of friends that have different parts to my life. And, I have my childhood friends who, we've been together since we were like 6 or 7 years old, and we do affirmations to each other, by text. I have my NIRSA friends, my golf friends, but my NIRSA friends, I have a group of Black women that we would get together during COVID and play games online. And I tell you, I think it was about maybe 4 months into the pandemic, and we were laughing uncontrollably because, you could tell, this thing was really hitting all of us very hard. And so it was something that we certainly needed. So I have my moments of getting that empowerment from these women and from other men as well throughout this time. But the group that has helped empower me the most is my Black women recreational directors. This group, we came together back in 2019 talking about the fact that we wanted to see more Black women in this role that we're in. And we created, the group, and we're up to, I think there's 11 of us now. We encourage each other, we empower each other. We just had a session at the national conference called Do I Belong? Again, hard conversations, hard information for people to hear, but definitely I think it was needed. So that's for me, that's where the empowerment has come. And then I also have always tried to do that with others, especially with my HBCU work, who I've been really trying to push myself out of for a long time. I'm still in it. I'm there for support, but we have younger folks who, I shouldn't say younger, less seasoned people, maybe that's the better word, right? Less seasoned people, so that they can continue the work and let them shine. It's their time. So that's where it comes from for me.
Yeah. Zack or Leigh?
I'll jump in quickly. So like Jocelyn, I've got circles of people that empower me in different ways. I've got my partner at home he's always lifting me up, always encouraging me to put my best foot forward. I've got my square of people at work who empower me and push me to keep trying to make the changes that are needed in our area. And I've got my people in NIRSA who empower me, who I can come to when I'm having issues, or when I need someone to vent, when I need to have an open discussion about something we're all experiencing. My LGBTQ caucus colleagues recently, we had a pretty lengthy discussion on burnout and on how we're combating that in our work lives and our personal lives. And just the things that came out of that discussion were very empowering in terms of bringing yourself to work, how you bring yourself home from work, and what that looks like in your day-to-day life.
Thanks, Zach.
I would say for me, this year has really been a year of self-reflection. A lot of that has come from, I recently found out I was diagnosed with ADHD, and something that I've struggled with for a really long time and not necessarily understood what that was or what it meant and what that looked like, and how it affected my work and how it affected my lifestyle. And a lot of the time when you get a diagnosis like that, it can potentially be a little crushing because you feel like you've done something wrong, but it's been out of your control. But for me, it actually was one of the most empowering things that I've actually dealt with in the last year, because it has given me an opportunity to reflect on why I'm doing things the way I'm doing them, what's working for me, what hasn't been working for me, and why those things may not have been working for me. And I've done so much research recently on that topic and really started to talk a lot about awareness of how ADHD can affect professionals and how it can affect women specifically. Most women are not diagnosed with ADHD until their mid to late 30s, even into their 40s. And because of that, utilizing awareness on social media, I've had so many friends reach out and people I don't even necessarily know that well saying, I thank you so much for sharing this. This is something I've struggled with too. And this has given me a voice of my own to be able to try and advocate for myself. And knowing that by raising awareness of something that I've been struggling with is helping other people advocate is a really powerful thing. And it's also helped push me to continue to advocate for myself and what my needs are and how to show up for myself.
Thank you for that, Leigh. That's a great tie-in to our next question. You know, we think about different things that we learn and how that could sometimes even leads to advocating on the behalf of others, either from our own lived experiences or the experiences that we learn from hearing others' stories. So thank you. Steve, I'm going to have you tackle this next one, but can you talk a little bit about just over the past, this past last year, if you've learned something new from someone that you've mentored and that led to an opportunity to empower them into a new role?
Yeah. So for me, it's like this past year has you have COVID normal, everybody's been going through that, but me deciding to change jobs in the middle of this and change jobs from a place that, was there for a really long time. It was like back to the hope part. I don't know. Hopefully that was a good thing, right? No, it's been really good, for us. But my wife and I decided this was like the perfect time for us to move into this. So my son is finishing up his grad work at Georgia Southern up the road from Leigh. They're a little bit apart, but it was time for us to try something new. So when I decided to move, I was like, I need to be really intentional about learning from my new staff. And so I've been very lucky to have a lot of great mentors who have empowered me throughout the years. And one of my go-to people who Cara and Jocelyn are very familiar with, Dr. Julie Wallace-Carr, who's at JMU. She gave me a book when I left, and it's a book by Michael Watkins, who does a lot of things on change it's called The First 90 Days. And so we decided, as I was coming up with I'm going to read this, I'm going to see how I might implement, but it really plays perfectly into kind of this idea of what are you learning from other people. So the first really 90 days of my job, I spent meeting and listening without making any decisions. at all. So it really helped me kind of understand where folks are at. At JMU, we produced, 5 to 6 folks that were going out into the field every year. So I was really used to thinking about how are we mentoring people, but coming into a new group of professionals about how do I do that? They've been without a director for about 3 years. How does that operate when you got a new person coming into? So for me, Jason Corvati is one of my associate directors. He's an awesome person. He's actually really good friends with Paul's boss too, Aaron Hobson, and he was a GA at Florida together. For me, learning about the department, learning about the history from him in particular, really allowed me to kind of bring in my perspective from JMU to maybe free Jason up a little bit and say, yeah, we can actually try to do some things differently, as we kind of hit the ground running on that. So it's been fun so far to learn from the people that have that experience and then bring in what I know from my past experience too. So.
And Steve, I loved how you honed in on that whole idea of listening. We've talked a lot about with exhibiting critical hope, the importance of this listening piece. And as we're personally going through change, and then the people that we're working with are going through changes with us, and we're also doing some of that together.
Absolutely.
So though, when we think about times, we always like to talk about the positive, right? But when are we maybe least effective in empowering others? And how does one learn how to empower others? So we'll let Zack and Paul start us off here. And if anybody else like to jump in, go ahead.
So for me personally, I've found I'm least effective at empowering others when I'm not being empowered as well. So when the people that I'm reporting to or that should be building me up are not doing that in the most effective way, I have a hard time taking my work and using it to empower those who are expecting me to empower them. And that kind of leads into, for me, how you learn to empower others as well, because I look at that twofold. There's the positive way where you're being empowered and you see that, and that teaches you how to empower others. Mm-hmm. And there's the other side of it where you don't feel like you're being empowered, where you feel like maybe you're being cut down and your contributions are being minimalized. And you see that and you think, I don't want the people reporting to me to feel that way. So I'm make sure that whatever I'm doing, whatever they're doing, I'm empowering them and making sure that they feel encouraged and that they can come to work as their best selves and be empowered to do what they need to do to be successful.
I would say for me, the times where I feel like I'm not being as empowering for others, especially my students, is when I just make assumptions that they'll just say what they'll need to say or come to me with a problem just all willy-nilly. Because some people, while there are some students that have no problem telling you, or some people don't have no problem telling you how they feel, or if they need an addition to be resolved, or they have an idea or something like that, some people, they still need to find their voice. And if you just make that something where they'll just say it, you leave out a lot of opportunities for people to say what they need to say. So it goes back to making those genuine connections with people. Sometimes you just got to dig it out from people and getting into those conversations of hey, how are you really doing? How are you with school? How are you? What are you thinking about this topic or this subject? Or can I get you involved in this opportunity? So just being more intentional with those connections that you make with certain people, that may give them that permission with themselves to be able to contribute more or speak out more or things like that. At least that's from my experience.
Cara?
Yeah, go ahead, Jocelyn.
No, I just, when Zack started talking, what came to mind for me was, it's just a simple golden rule. It's treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, once you think that way, empowerment should become a little easier for people. If you want people to treat you with respect and you want people to recognize, then you need to do the same thing, right? And so that's I think is the start of the empowerment for that individual.
Yeah. Thank you, Jocelyn. Yeah, it's it's interesting, throughout all of our experiences so far, right? We've all stepped into different spaces where we have been in a volunteer leadership role or a leadership role serving our departments. And there's always that time, right, for us to adjourn from that and let go of some of that, right? So others can step in. And so how we think about empowering. And for me, really thinking about my current role as president and how I'll be adjourning from this role. And what does that look like in the future, right? But we could talk about these things, even if we're talking about Steve, having his son in college. There's different personal and professional things that we have that we move through. And a good theory that talks about that is Tuckman's theory, with team development. But if you think about really rich experiences that we have, when we have to leave those, there is this feeling of mourning or loss sometimes in letting go. So with that, how do we go about transitioning when adjourning certain roles? And Jocelyn, I'll let you start us off with this one.
Of course you will. As I had told you guys earlier, I had been on the board for 4 years. Was an annual director and then became a 3-term, for regular board at large. And so at the end of that, I was, thinking, oh, well, I might as well just keep on going and I'll go for the presidential track. Well, didn't make it. And it was kind of like cold water in the face, but it was probably the best thing for me because I needed the break and I needed a break from it. Not that I still wasn't mourning the fact that I wouldn't be on there and I wouldn't be, contributing. But I knew that I would be able to start focusing back on the other areas that I had not really put that much time into since I had been on the board. And that's the work I do with my HBCUs. That's the work I do within the region. It's the work I'm doing with my Black women's group. So it was definitely a blessing in disguise for me. And it took me a while to realize that, because I had to get over my own feelings, so to speak. But once I got refocused in on the areas that should be more important to me, for empowering other people, then it became a little easier.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Anybody else want to jump in? Zach?
Yeah, sure. So kind of similar to Jocelyn, for me, it's focusing on those other areas that you see you at yourself adding value to and focus on what's next for you as well. So for me, when I left the Canadian student leader position, I was lucky that I was graduating right into this full-time role that I'm in. So it really gave me something new to focus on, something new I had to learn and contribute to, and was able to take away some of those feelings of what am I supposed to do with myself now that I've lost this kind of big important role in the association. And now as I settled into this role, I've been able to step back into some other NIRSA involvements and transition from being the student leader into now serving on the assembly and co-facilitating the LGBTQ caucus, and using that involvement to kind of keep myself in the loop on the position that I transitioned out of, and still feeling like I had some involvement there just by following along and seeing what this year's student leadership team is up to, continuing on the Give to Grow that we started, and looks like they're doing great with that. So shout out to them. And yeah, just keeping that involvement, keeping what you're passionate about from the role that you're transitioning out of, and seeing how you can use those passions to further involve yourself in different ways.
Can I jump in just real quick?
You sure can. Jump in. Anybody can jump in anytime.
Sure. So like I said, for me, like I had a big adjourning moment again last summer, leaving a spot I'd been for a really long time. And I think one of the things that you don't sometimes realize is that you're probably going to be in a period of kind of mourning. Like, even though you're really excited about what you're maybe about to do, it's, you're going into kind of an unknown environment. What was before is not going to be the same as what you're going into. So I think you kind of have to give yourself permission to go through that as well. And so like that Tuckman piece really gives you this idea there is a stage of that that's, it's real, that you need to think about. And so, yeah, I think that's a really important piece of, looking at, how do you handle hope? So,
yeah. It's almost like giving yourself some grace to be able to transition into the next role that you're going to be empowered into going through that. Yeah. I like that. I like that thought that Steve about giving yourself time to mourn. And it's hard. And if we don't talk about it, it's hard to know. And so it was really a good transition to the next question about how do we even know that we're empowered? How are we doing how do we know we're doing a good job of empowering others? Right. And so are we getting feedback? What does this look like when we know that empowerment is actually being successful? Steve, do you want to start that one?
Sure. It's funny because, Cara, you definitely know this is I'm an assessment person, through and through. I really believe in that. And, how do you measure things? But for me, this is all about your eyes. You see it with your eyes, and you see kind of the fruits of what happens. And a lot of it is planting a seed, and it's springtime. We're watching the flower. We're finally getting flowers come up here in Massachusetts, and so Paul's probably not quite there yet. Maybe he's got a little bit walk with flowers, and Zack too, probably. For me, that's really what it's all about. Is when you think about what are those conversations and those interactions and whatever that might be. What did you do to set the stage for that person to be able to make something happen? I've seen it a ton of times throughout my career where it's hey, we've got this particular thing that we're trying to work on. We have a problem we're trying to solve. What's the outcome we want to achieve, and letting that person work through what they think is the best way. And maybe you planted, again, a small seed, but it turns into something completely different. And again, you see that with your eyes and be yeah, that's an awesome experience though, when you go through those things of going from, having that conversation up front to when you see something happen that, maybe you played a small role, but they did all the work. I think it's one of the greatest things.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Jocelyn?
So yeah, Steve stole some of my thunder, but no.
You can add to it. You can add to the storm.
I think it's really interesting. You never know. I'm not the assessment person that Steve is, but I do have ways by which it comes back to me, and that's usually when it's someone who I don't even remember saying anything to, saying to me, that thing you did. That thing you said really meant a lot to me, and this is what I did. And it's funny because my good friend Pete, you may see this. He's at UMass Lowell. He came to me during the conference, and he made a comment about something that he heard me say or whatever it was. And that just, when I saw that question, I was like, yeah, that's when you've made that impact, and that person, you were not directing this towards somebody. It's something that you were talking about, something that you were trying to give that information out to people. It's coming from a genuine place. And then when you get that back in different forms, and not just in the one or two people that you were talking to, but in someone from indirectly, that is super exciting for me to know that I made that change in someone in a positive way.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Paul, do you have something to add?
Not much, because Steve and Jocelyn said so many good things. So I'll just say the way I've known that is basically having those post event discussions or end of the semester evaluations where we'll talk about something that one of my students did or one of my clubs did, and they talk about yeah, we did these things, but we couldn't have done it without you, or we really appreciated you cared or thought about us more than just an employee or part of your job, that you actually cared about that stuff, cared about us as people, so that really empowered us to do a better job, and knowing that you had our backs. So that those are the moments where I feel okay, things worked out well.
Yeah. Well, and so Paul, we'll stay with you for a second too. So with, we talked a lot about critical hope, and it's hard work and there's a lot to be done. And then we're saying, okay, now we're going to bring people along the way and empower others. Do you have any resources, strategies, or practices or pieces of wisdom of how we go about exhibiting hope for positive change with others?
Absolutely. I guess the best thing I could say is just finding your own way to make genuine connections. I know this is like, it's a thing that we've been talking about like throughout this whole session, but just like finding a way to just connect with people in a way that they just know that you're not checking off a box, or you're not just like just saying it just to say it. Like, for example, for me, when it comes to my student leads or with my clubs, like I will spend the first 10 minutes of a meeting just talking about like, hey, how are you like outside of schoolwork? Talk to me about like a fight you're having with your teammate, or what you did on your spring break, or how are classes and things like that. Just finding those times, just finding your own way and doing it. And not every way is like the magic bullet. Sometimes for some people it just takes time to get to know them. Some people are just not comfortable doing that. So they find their own different ways of doing, like getting those connections. But like at the end of the day, it's just like making sure that you're reaching out to people in a way that like, they feel like you actually care about them.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Zach, and then we'll open it up to everybody. Go ahead, Zach.
So I wanted to build off Paul's one on find the connections a little bit, because for me, one of my best strategies has been to find like-minded people that I can connect with to talk about the issues that we're facing, where we need to be displaying this critical hope, and to see that you're not alone in having these issues and running into these barriers that you need to try and get past, so that you can see it's more of a like association-wide, a system-wide problem. And it's not localized to just, oh, I'm the only one who's not able to do this, so I must be the problem. And on top of that, the other one that's really worked well for me is celebrating the victories, no matter how small they are. Yeah. So you go in saying, we need to change these 10 things, and you only come away with one thing that was actioned and is a positive change. That's still a win, and that still deserves being celebrated.
Thanks, Zach. Anybody else? Well, I'd like to wrap up our session here, just talking about this idea of unshakable hope. And so why, and again, we talked a lot about this hard work, patience, Zach just talked about celebrating the small wins, because those are just as important. Why is it important to have unshakable hope? And I'm going to let you all jump in as you feel it.
I can jump in real fast. I think what I've learned a lot in the last couple of years with the pandemic is that life is not perfect. In fact, it's very messy. And one of our keynote speakers said to us at the annual conference that really hit me was that whatever you resist in life, you exist in life. And I think that could not be more true. The only constant will always be change, and you can either grow with it or you can resist it. And you can absolutely count on being knocked down in life, but having unshakable hope with the ability to pick yourself back up and recognize that you won't be where you are now forever really can be the catalyst to moving your life forward and pushing you into a different direction.
Yeah, I like, when Zach talked about, small steps and small victories, it's really hard to not look at the big picture. And that's, throughout this time with COVID and everything, we knew this thing was going to not end. We knew that we were going to be moving into another state of existence. Let's put it that way. And so we had to just, as we talk about, celebrate the small victories, I know for me, I was happy I still had a job. So that's a huge victory for me, because there are a lot of my colleagues who this did not happen to. So I think, bringing things down a bit so that you can work toward, those big things and just not get caught up in that huge, especially in times like of where we are right now. And that could be in any in the future, we could still, have something very similar. But yeah, to take things, at a smaller level of where it's Steve and our job. We have to look at beyond. That's just the way we are. But we even need help with that because we don't, we have no idea what tomorrow's going to bring to our university when it comes to our budgets and things of that nature. We worry about it, but I really can't. I really have to worry about the things that I know I can control and the things that I know I can work toward. So.
I mean, for me, it's like if you think about the career path that we've chosen of, working in a higher ed institution with students who are young, it's like, if there's not hope, there's not a reason to go to school. There's not a reason to educate you. And so for me, it like always circles back to that. And so this idea about how do we stay positive and how do we kind of project that, to, our staff that we're working with, which projects that to our students, staff, which projects that to, the general student body. Most of us were really lucky to be in a place where it is probably one of the most positive places on campus. My supervisor is constantly saying, I need to come over there more. And that reminds me of why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not dealing with the problems. It's dealing with people positive and happy. And so for me, that always helps refocus me anytime I do that. If I feel like, okay, I'm getting too myopic, or like Jocelyn said, I'm looking too far down the road. I was like, okay, just get out of your office, go walk around and see what people are doing. And that really kind of, will change your attitude and change everything. So for me, I think that's super important part of what we do.
So for me, it's a very small thought, but I feel like what Leigh and Jocelyn and Steve just said all piled into it. And that sometimes all we have is hope that things are going to get better or things are going to improve. And sometimes we're in a position where things are better, things are improving, and we don't need that hope. But if we continue to display that hope and continue to exhibit that hope, then we can provide that for the person who's in the position that does need it in the moment.
Everyone said it all. I'm good.
Thanks, Paul.
I knew that was coming. I don't know why.
Well, I just want to say I feel like my stomach rumbling from just thinking about the quote that we read at the beginning from Archbishop Desmond Tutu about just being here and having this conversation really excites me about this idea of hope and what we've learned about hope. And as I'm kind of adjourning from my role and having the opportunity to create this series, going back to Paul Wesselman, I hope there's a ripple effect of this hope. And Zack, I think you really hit it on point with this idea of how we sustain it is maybe it's not our time that we need it. And maybe that's when we're needing to pay attention to others and stepping into those spaces to sustain hope in others. And so I just want to thank all of you so much for being here with me today and wrapping this up really quickly as things wrap up April 30th. But if everyone listening, I just want to remind ourselves, even when we adjourn from certain things, such as the Critical Hope vlog sessions, that we continue to listen, learn, and do better. And then may we inspire each other as we progress together as change makers, engaging in critical hope and sustaining hope. And most importantly, what's important to all of us is to be the change the world needs to create and sustain healthy communities. So be well, NIRSA friends and colleagues. Thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you all around. Keep up the good work.